All right, should be live to YouTube right now. If anyone ends up joining, I know it's late, so I doubt anyone's gonna be lining up for mock drafts right now. But I just wanted to go through my final mock draft before, obviously, it goes official because it is Thursday now, and draft starts at 5 my time, which is Vegas time, 8 o'clock Eastern. So I'm really excited. I only did one official mock draft. I have been personally changing mine, but I'm going to kind of be going through this with you guys. I obviously made like a little PowerPoint, super basic. Just got the player's name, their stats, and some sort of highlight video I found for them. If you're listening for the podcast, obviously you won't be able to see the video, but it's just one of those visual elements that'll be for the YouTube page and make it a little better. I won't be talking too much over the videos. It's just something for you guys to see when you watch while I talk over why I think the player's going to get picked there. Most of the time I'll be going through some of their strengths and weaknesses just to kind of go through that, but not too much. I try to keep my mock drafts pretty small or simple and short, just so I can go through it, and we'll see. And mine ended up being a little complicated, obviously, as they tend to be. And if one player gets taken for another one, that obviously messes up the entire draft, just because of the draft order and who they want to take. So the mock draft with the idea that it's perfect, but this is how I could see it. This is definitely a realistic thing I could see. Minus a few other ones that I'll say there's a bit of a reach even for myself. But when those come along, I'll explain it as well. So first overall, I think we all know where this is going to go. You know, the Bengals are going to select Joe Burrow. Ridiculous stat line in 2019, as we all know. The greatest single season in college football history for a quarterback, at least. 5,671 yards, 60 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Doesn't even sound real, obviously. It's just pretty insane. The guy can make any pass you want. He definitely has the ability to move from his legs, and a lot of his teammates are going to end up benefiting from his season as well. Justin Jefferson being one of those, and Randy Moss's son, if I'm not mistaken, who plays tight end for them, is also going to. You know, the small things that people worry about. He has small hands, I guess. Sure, whatever. They worried about that about Arizona's quarterback last year. Didn't seem to be too much of a problem. Didn't have the most prolific rookie season, but not everyone can be Patrick Mahomes. I do expect him to struggle in year one, obviously. He's going to be playing for the Bengals, and they stink. At the same time, the Bengals have been a team that have made the playoffs quite consistently over the year. So, as incompetent as they aren't the worst franchise. They haven't been past the first round of the playoffs since like I've been born, if I'm not mistaken. But they have made the playoffs is kind of the point I'm trying to make here. And there's no doubt in my mind. This is obviously the for sure pick of the draft. Everyone knows they're not training it, and everyone knows who they're taking. Let's see. Yeah, going on to the second one, I don't think this one's a surprise at all for anyone. Excuse me. For anyone who's going to be who has their mock drafts, Washington Redskins are definitely going to select Chase Young, who also had a ridiculous 2019 stat line. 7 forced fumbles, 16 and a half sacks, and 21 tackles for a loss. Those are stats hard to get even for Madden's purposes. And, you know, obviously he's not going to get that in the NFL. That's just inflated because he played against worse college opponents, especially when it comes to Ohio State, who never really seemed to be playing top tier talent. Now, I know Isaiah Simmons had a very big draft combine, who's very impressive, but I think it's quite obvious to me that Chase Young is the guy to take here. We've seen the effect of defensive ends. Nick Bosa was a rookie last year, and he was like one of the most prolific players in the Super Bowl. And getting them young, obviously, is ideal because at some point you end up coming to an Aaron Donald or you end up coming to a Khalil Mack where the money just isn't worth the production, or they can't live up to the money of the production, I should be saying. Now, if there's anything bad to say about Chase Young if you want to go there. His strength, maybe he could be a little stronger. And apparently, from what I've read and understood, that he has gap integrity. He bites on play fakes, so his player IQ may not be the highest. But honestly, I think we can push those aside, and you guys can see from the highlight tape if you're watching the video. It's very hard for him to be guarded, and maybe he will bite on a few pump fakes during the season, but I expect him to have a very productive season. It's going to be a little more difficult in Washington. It's not like Nick Bosa was going into the 49ers. So I don't expect that level of production, but over time, we will come to know him as one of the best pass rushers in the league. Now, this is the part of the draft where debate starts to kind of exist, if you will. Now, the Lions have come out publicly and said that they're willing to trade within the top 10. And also the person picking next says that as well, which is the New York Giants. So I'm thinking, okay, well, Detroit has the third pick, so obviously the advantage goes to them. Just so, logistically speaking, third is better than fourth. Now, I took into factor one thing: competency. The Lions stink. I mean, let's be honest; they're the worst franchise in the NFL, quite obviously. Do I get a deal done? No, I really don't. Which leaves them with their pick at the end of the day, and you'll see what I had come up next. In his 2019, he had 1 forced fumble, 3 interceptions, 9 passes defended, and I had the Lions taking Jeffrey Okudah from Ohio State. Now, as competent as the Lions are, they are still getting the best cornerback, and they traded Darius Slay. I don't remember to who. They have a massive need at cornerback now, and if they're looking to build around a young player, this is one of those guys who I think you could do it. The track record for Ohio State cornerbacks maybe isn't the best, but I mean, I don't think Ohio State's produced someone like him. He's much better than Gareon Conley if I have to make a direct comparison. Who was obviously a first round talent who slid back because of his allegations. They're definitely on different playing levels, even though Gareon Conley wasn't as good as he was supposed to be. Yeah, I mean, you see it for yourself. He has very few weaknesses as a cornerback, and I do think he'll be productive and good for the Lions, whatever that's worth. So now we can kind of go into the next pick here. Fourth is the first trade of the draft, and I have Jacksonville trading up over the Giants, and I don't know what the exact ramifications of the trade are going to be, what picks and what pick are going to go through. That's even more impossible to predict than the actual trade itself, and the trade itself was already difficult enough. Anyways, Jacksonville is acquiring a plethora of picks with all of their different talent they're going through. They're tanking as hard as possible, and as much as I personally enjoy watching Minshew Magic, I think they're going to be looking for their next quarterback. And he's the guy. I mean, he's the bait. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be really good, but it seems to be the perfect fit for Jacksonville looking to destroy their franchise even further by trading up and giving up a lot of assets for this fourth pick and leapfrogging, because they know he's not going to be there by the time their normal pick would be, which is, I believe, is 10th, which we'll see coming up. Now, he was pretty good in 2019, 3,471 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Excuse me. Sorry, let me just get to my notes here. I think it goes without saying. I mean, the reason we haven't seen Oregon in any big games because he just hasn't been winning big games. In that killer instinct, it's like he has everything there. It's the fundamentals everything you want is there, but you need that kind of big energy going into the NFL to be a leader. That's who your guy. That's who you want your guy to be. And when you're seeing stuff like this, and you hear people say that about him, it's very concerning. He's the biggest question mark in the first round for me, if that makes sense, or he has the most pressure to be good or bad. Personally, I don't think he's going to be very good, but I could see it go the other way without a doubt, and it'll be interesting to watch him kind of battle as time goes on. Coming up next at 5th, and I know there's been a lot of current controversy here, saying with his injury, and I think he's unfairly been compared to Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson didn't let his injuries heal correctly, and also modern technology and medicine has made it much more possible to heal these kinds of injuries. And the Dolphins need a quarterback, let's be honest. And they have 3 picks in the first round. They're going to be taking a quarterback. And by all means, Tua could probably be the best of this draft. Some people say he could be the worst. There's a lot of people who doubt him, but I say his statistics speak for themselves. I watch football, and man, this guy can just sling the rock, and he's a left-handed too, which is always an advantage. His 2019 stats in his limited time in the game: 2,840 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. If he had stayed through the whole thing, his touchdown numbers would have been a lot closer to Joe Burrow's than I think a lot of people would have imagined. And besides this year, obviously, he was a major player at Alabama. And when he took over for Jalen Hurts, that was kind of the big story around him. But he was able to create his own legacy at Alabama just past his performance in the bowl game. I don't see it going any other way here. This pick is the one where I'm like, wow, could I see this happening? Yes, that's obviously why I picked it. They could be going in a lot of different ways here, but as much as the Chargers say they like Tyrod Taylor, I don't think they do. And I think they're really looking for a quarterback, and I think they're going to be really bummed out that Jacksonville traded up for a quarterback. So here I have the Los Angeles. Yeah, okay. I want to make sure I didn't put San Diego. They have the Los Angeles Chargers are taking quarterback Jordan Love. His 2019 stats are not great. It's 3,402 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions. Look, those stats are bad, obviously, but people are drafting him on his potential. And even though I don't think he handled the interviews very well on ESPN, like answering for his 17 touchdowns, he's just a guy in the draft combine that people love. And there's always at least one per year where guys skyrocket in the draft. And he's going to go in the first round. I don't think the Chargers are going to have too much of a problem taking one here. Maybe they'll let him sit behind Tyrod Taylor for a year. I mean, I could see that happening too. That's definitely the trend going forward. We saw it with Daniel Jones a little bit, and obviously Patrick Mahomes. So I could definitely see that kind of situation. I just think the Chargers want their next franchise quarterback because Phillip Rivers is gone, and they're struggling to get fans in their stadiums. And a first-round quarterback is definitely one way to do it. It draws interest. Tyrod Taylor is not going to draw interest for this franchise, no matter how good their uniforms look, and I know they're popular. I think this one's pretty set in stone as long as it kind of falls the way that I've been describing. And this is a player that I could have seen the Chargers taking, but I already explained that. So the Carolina Panthers select defensive tackle Derek Brown, one of the fastest risers in the draft, a real defensive just monster. His 2019 stats, he had 2 forced fumbles, 4 passes defended, and 4 sacks. I mean, the guy played all 4 years for Auburn. I don't think he ever missed a game. Just someone with really high football IQ. He works hard. And defensive tackles and defensive linemen, I think, are on the rise in terms of popularity because the Chiefs and the 49ers both had good offensive lines. Let me just pull up my notes here. Excuse me. Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty obvious when I stated in the stats he only had 4 sacks. So he's not a sack producer, but at the defensive tackle position, I don't think that's necessarily the job of a defensive tackle. 4 sacks for a defensive tackle in any given year are pretty decent. I mean, those are kind of top tier defensive tackle numbers, anyways. And people question his motor a little bit, but I don't hear that as often. That's just something. It's just for the simple fact that people thought he should have had like a little more production. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. But overall, I think he's definitely the best defensive tackle in the draft, and someone who combine scouts grew in love with during this process. Next up, this is when the offensive tackles, in my opinion, are going to start flying. Don't have any stats, obviously, because that just doesn't make sense. The Cardinals originally, I believe, were going to pick a receiver here, like Jerry Jeudy. Considering they made their big trade for DeAndre Hopkins, I don't think that's. People have much different rankings for offensive linemen in their personal mocks and stuff like that. Just for me, I think Andrew Thomas is the best. And I know highlight tapes don't really do it very much justice because any offensive lineman highlight tape is just going to be them blocking really well. So it's at some point it's kind of hard to explain the differences between all the offensive linemen. I'll do my best here. I'm just pulling up my notes. Athletic, talented. He can mirror speed rushers. He's quick out of his stance. His weaknesses, not much. I mean, I have some notes here, but even saying them, even just looking at them, I don't think he's going to come in and be the best offensive lineman in the draft, but I do think he's the best. I think he has the potential to be the most dominant, and I think the Cardinals will see that as well. So this is the second part of that trade, obviously, because the Giants traded back. They want an offensive lineman, and I think there's an equally or just slightly worse offensive tackle. And obviously that's Tristan Wirfs. I have the New York Giants selecting Tristan Wirfs at the 9th spot. This is someone who they've been scouting and they've made public anyways, so I think they'd be really happy if he fell to them after trading back and getting whatever assets they wanted. And they're obviously trying to accumulate a lot of picks because they're trying to build a team and then they don't have one ready yet. So I think they're going to be really happy to see Tristan Wirfs at this spot. It's kind of someone who they would even consider picking at their original spot, and this is just even better for them. The knocks on him that say that he's not very quick to slide over. He falls on the ground too much. I've seen some people say that. I wrote that down just because I think it's especially interesting. That's something people note. He does need some development, but that's the kind of place that makes sense for him to go in terms of the Giants anyways. At number 10, I don't think the Cleveland Browns could be any happier at this point. They're going to be selecting Isaiah Simmons at this spot. His 2019 stats: 2 forced fumbles, 8 passes defended, 8 sacks. The guy can play safety and linebacker. Have you ever heard of that at all? Now, while he's undersized at linebacker, it's a legitimate spot that he can be in. He had the best draft combine by far. He was the most impressive player to come out of the combine, and this is a position of need when it comes to the Browns. So people are going to be saying that this is the steal of the draft, even though it's at 10. In reality, he probably will go Super Bowl 4, but with the desperate need at quarterback in offensive line in the beginning, I think this is a real possibility now. And I'm not depending on the Lions to make a good pick or the best pick, in my opinion, which would be Isaiah Simmons. And I think the only notes I had on him for the weaknesses or his size for a linebacker. And now he can't play middle linebacker. Obviously, he's not big enough, and that's kind of goes hand in hand. But his ability to shed blocks isn't the greatest. He's more of kind of an outside linebacker blitz package, not someone that you're going to line up a defensive end. But overall, the amount of positives that come from him are just unbelievable. And it'll just be another talent on the Cleveland Browns that they somehow waste and they go 7-9 next year. First receiver off the board. I think this goes without say. I know the Jets have a lot of needs, but receiver is certainly one of them. They're going to take the best receiver in the draft, Jerry Jeudy. 2019 stats without Tua for a lot of it. 1,164 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 14.9 yards per reception. Best route runner in the draft. I think he stands out above the rest for that. He's just one of those Alabama receivers that are primed to dominate the league day one. Obviously, there's a very good track record of Alabama receivers. He's even good at running after the catch. Good for, which would be very good for the Jets, obviously, because their running game, despite having one of the best running backs, wasn't very good. He's even a good blocker, which is ridiculous. He doesn't have the best height, and he has a pretty thin frame. People say he has a few spouts of drop balls, but I mean, I don't necessarily think that's going to be a factor in his NFL career, and I think he's going to be ready day one to be a wide receiver one. And I think the Raiders are going to be very sad that he was taken before, but I don't think they're going to be willing to trade up either because they're looking to acquire a second-round pick themselves. Speaking of the Raiders, another receiver goes off the board to the Raiders. And the only other player I was thinking about in this position would be CJ Henderson. And the reason I went with them taking CeeDee Lamb is this. CeeDee Lamb is going to be more of a difference maker in his rookie year than CJ Henderson would be. And the Raiders already know that their cornerbacking core stinks. And I don't think CJ Henderson is going to make a difference. But I think having someone like CeeDee Lamb is going to, especially if they're trying to invest in Carr or even Mariota, who's like the highest paid backup quarterback in the past 10 years. His stats in 2019 were ridiculous. 1,347 yards, 15 touchdowns, and he averaged 19 yards per reception. You know, he's not as good of a route runner, but he is a better yard after the catch guy than Jerry Jeudy, who's also very good. I think the Raiders are going to be smart about this. I do think they have a very good drafting philosophy, and they know that they need a cornerback, but they're not willing to reach like they did last year for Clelin Ferrell. I think they've learned their lesson, and I think they're just going to take the best available, and it just so happens that it's a position of desperate need for the team. You know, the only problem is his speed. I think that's what it comes down to. He's not a burner like Jerry Jeudy or Henry Ruggs. And I don't think the Raiders are going to be interested in taking Henry Ruggs here just because it's quite obvious how much better CeeDee Lamb is. Speaking of Henry Ruggs, though, the 13th pick, the 49ers select Henry Ruggs. So 3 receivers taken in a row, just like 3 quarterbacks. I think this could definitely be known as an untraditional draft. Just it's untraditional in and of itself, and I think that trend could translate in the actual picks. The 49ers are desperate at this point for a receiver. They need one more than anything. And I think they're hoping to get their own version of the receiver from the Chiefs. They're looking for a burner, and that's what he is. You know, he's small, doesn't have the best catch radius, but that's not what they're looking for him to do. Now, whether they can get the ball to him is another question. I'm not a big fan of their quarterback, but if there's anyone who's going to be the next Tyreek Hill in this draft, it's obviously going to be him. I mean, he's I think he is the fastest player in the draft, if I'm not mistaken. He catches an open field on. We'll see if we'll see if he's more akin to Tengen Jr. or like excuse me. We'll see if he's more akin to Tengen Jr. than he is the Kansas City receiver Tyreek Hill, but that's yet to be seen, and that's something the 49ers, I think, are willing to risk without a doubt. His stats in 2019, by the way, 821 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 19.5 yards per reception. Not the greatest, but again, you have to include the fact that they had a backup quarterback who probably couldn't throw the ball down the field effectively like Tua could. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as they keep acquiring talent, they're going to be taking, in my opinion, offensive tackle Jedrick Willis from Alabama. They're going to want to protect their guy. They got Rob Gronkowski, Mike Evans, any offensive weapon you could possibly imagine. I mean, they're building a super team on paper. Now, whether kind of this old man Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski can suit up and be this monster powerhouse offense that they are on paper is yet to be seen, but they're going to want to invest in that offensive line and make sure that he has time to pass the ball. And they're getting one of the best offensive linemen here in the draft. Oh, Jedrick Will. The problems with him is that, which is actually very bad, but just how talented he is in terms of pure blocking, I think it's going to outweigh it, and that's why he wasn't taking one of the first two offensive linemen. He sometimes has a hard time seeing the blitz come. But that's something you would hope that Tom Brady could help him recognize and get better at in training camp, because Tampa Bay actually has a pretty good pass rush. So that's something that they can definitely work on in practice and get better at over time and during the season. But overall, they're going to want to do whatever they can to get Tom Brady as protected as possible, and this is definitely one way to do that. Now, the definite second best cornerback in this draft, I think, is going to go to the Denver Broncos, who just lost Chris Harris. I think this one's pretty straightforward. They're going to be looking for him. I think they're going to be pretty happy to give him at 15th. He could go before to the Raiders, I'm not sure, but definitely if he's at this point, he's going to be the best player available and definitely a position of need for the Denver Broncos. Pretty straightforward. No interceptions last year in 2019, but he did have 11 passes defended, which I think is the highest, definitely in the first round that I have going. So overall, a great player and someone they're going to want to look forward to. And, Denver's got their little team going, and I think they'll be pretty happy about that. Well, let me go to his weaknesses. Excuse me one moment. Yeah, so I don't know why I didn't remember this. His biggest gripe is that he's a bad tackler, which is definitely something you need in the NFL, and something that's the reason he's not going to go in the top 10. I think if he was elite when it comes to tackling off the edge, when it comes to run game, that's something people will be looking for more. But hey, that's something that you're gonna have to invest in and teach him as time goes on. But in terms of pure coverage, he's very good. Now, this is something I've had pretty standard across all my drafts. So at 16th, I have Atlanta Falcons taking defensive end AJ Apencia. A really great stat line. 2019, 4 forced fumbles, 3 passes defended, and 11.5 sacks. The guy is a physical monster on the defensive line. Coming out of Iowa, he sets a tough edge. He's very strong. Plays with great power, like I said. But with that big power and that big frame of his, it comes with a lack of athleticism, and he does lack a little bit of quickness, and his pass rushing moves also aren't the great. But I think Atlanta will see that big raw power, and they've actually done a pretty good job of developing defensive ends over the years. And I think this is going to be the perfect landing spot for him. This would be ideal, like for his own personal career. He can do it all, though. I mean, at the end of the day, I think his 40 speed's pretty good too. It's just he's got to learn about that lateral quickness and refining those defensive moves off the edge. Because if he can get that down, he could definitely be a guy who can get around maybe 6 to 7 sacks a season, which is pretty much production you want out of your defensive end. So at 17th, I think I think the Cowboys are going to reach just a little bit, but that's even that saying that is a bit of an exaggeration. They're going to go for the best safety in the draft by far, Alabama's Xavier McKinney. 2019 stats include 4 forced fumbles, 5 passes defended, 3 interceptions, and 3 sacks. The guy can do it all, and the Cowboys really, really need a safety here. Um, it's my top need for them. I know that might be saying a bit much. Uh, he's very good in coverage. He's good vision, good eye discipline. He's solid run defender. He's just a little small, so he has problems tackling. It's all there, the whole package. Uh, it goes along with he has a hard time making plays on the ball. Again, that's why it's probably a little bit of a stretch. A safety that has tackle issues is like one of the biggest red flags, but his ability to do everything else, his quickness, his ability to cover the ball, I think is going to I think he's going to be a very, very good reach for the Cowboys here. They're not going to be able to get him later, and I think he definitely separates himself as the best. Maybe the only player who is comparable is Grant Delpit, but again, that's another player they're not going to be able to get on the other end of the second round. So I think they'll end up being pretty happy with who they get here. Miami's going to start investing in the offensive line. I don't think they have one single offensive lineman worth starting as of right now. Like they're going to be forcing guys who are backups in like they did last year. So they're going to take the best available offensive tackle here, and in my opinion, that's Mekhi Becton. Now, in terms of his skills, sorry, here we go. He's but one of the best things about him is his monster size. The guy is just insanely huge. He's good in space, can hit blocks in space. He's literally so massive it's going to cause mismatches. And if you're looking at the video, you can see him. He stands out as just the like quite literal biggest player on the field at any given time. He's just raw, man. Like, and that just makes sense. Like a kid that big, probably barely knows like what to do with all of that size. But without a doubt, it's someone who you would love to have on your football team, and especially if it's someone that you've personally scouted and believe in that you can develop his talent. He has the ability to be the best left tackle in the game. That might be a little bold to say, but I think it goes without a doubt that someone with that size can definitely change the way can take on anybody. There's no one you can say, "Oh, that's a mismatch." Whether they can go around him with a good set of defensive moves, that might be a different story. But I think Miami is going to be pretty excited to have a guy like that to start around Tua, who they definitely have to protect because of his injuries. Now, because the Raiders passed up on a cornerback in their first round pick, they're gonna have to go corner. And I don't think Trayvon Diggs is necessarily the best pick here. I think it's a bit of a reach. I do think he is pretty good. 2019 stats: 8 passes defended, 3 interceptions. There's a few other cornerbacks, Christian Fulton, that's going to go later on. In my opinion, he's the next best. Let's see. Here we go. good height, good. This is also the next few reasons I'm going to list is exactly the reason I think the Raiders are going to pick him. Good height and good length, good weight. Those are things that John Gruden loves to see out of a player, and I think that's going to be a big influence. He also can return kicks on special teams, which is something that I think the Raiders need as of right now. Again, he's another one of these guys who's raw and needs development. He's an outside corner only. He can't cover the slot. But again, that pulls to the Raiders' strength because they have a lot of inside cornerbacks at this time. I think Trayvon Mullen is a good inside cornerback, and obviously they have LaMarcus Joyner, who's also going to play that inside role. He also has troubles getting his head around the ball quickly. So again, does he deserve to go 19th overall? No. But are the Raiders desperate enough to do this? Yes, absolutely. Now, this is definitely a great pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars here, who I don't think they're going to end up giving this first round pick for the first round pick that they traded up for. I think that goes without saying. I don't know what the trade's going to be, but I definitely don't think it's going to be including this. I think Jacksonville is going to be taking defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina. 2019 stats: two passes defended, 6 sacks. He fell at this point. He deserves. He's a top 15 talent. It's just the way that team needs worked out that Jacksonville's just going to get lucky here, and they're definitely looking to build a big young offensive line, or defensive line. Excuse me. They're looking to really create a young core, and as incompetent as I believe they are, I don't think they're stupid enough to pass up what the value of defensive lines are. His weaknesses, a lot of it comes down to his moves, and he's almost like a 1-for-1 comparison to AJ Apencia. It's just people question his production, and also he tends to stand up really high. Again, it's a lot of it comes down to technique, but the raw ability, without a doubt, is there. And I think Jacksonville is going to be elated if he falls this far. At 21st overall, Philadelphia is definitely going to be grabbing a major position of need, which is outside linebacker, and also just happen to get the best linebacker, outside linebacker available, which is a traditional outside linebacker, I should say, not comparing him to Isaiah Simmons. You have Kenneth Murray, just monster stats in 2019: 4 sacks, 17 tackles for a loss. This is the premier guy who can go sideline to sideline here. And also he's available in coverage too. He's one of the better coverage linebackers in this draft. Pull this up here. He fits in a 4-3 or 3-4 defense. He's got great closing speed, helping coverage, strong, durable, is a good leader. The problem is he can be a little overly aggressive at times, but I mean, seriously, that's a pretty small weakness, especially something that a defensive coach, if you have a good one, and that's something I think he will have one in Philadelphia, he'll be able to nurture that ability quite easily. And obviously, defenses are a lot more strict in the NFL than they are in college, so I think Philly is going to have one of the best picks in the first round here. Normally, he wouldn't be here, but the Raiders no longer have a needed linebacker like I originally had predicted in the original draft stuff for free agency. Now, the minute I have 22nd, I have Minnesota Vikings selecting Justin Jefferson. 2019 stats, a little inflated, obviously, it goes without say. 1,540 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 13.9 yards per reception in 2019. Look, he's really good. I think there's no doubt. I don't think he stinks by anything, but he's definitely appropriately taken as the 4th best receiver here. And at the end of the day, the Vikings just traded away their best receiver, so they need a replacement here. and solid route runner. He pushes his teammates to be better too, which is something that you would definitely love to see. He just he lacks the speed. He's really just a solid route running receiver, probably the second best or third best route runner in the draft. He has a leaner frame. He definitely needs to build some strength. It's going to help when you have press coverage. He's not going to be able to get the ball off, but I do think the Vikings have a pretty good offensive system that are successful for receivers, and they already have a decent one, but that infusion of youth is definitely needed. And I think this is something they're going to be desperate for. I don't think they should have traded Stefon Diggs in the first place, in my opinion, but that's the hand they dealt themselves, and they're going to have to fill that hole somehow. And they also have another first round pick, so I don't think it's any skin off their back. It's not like their only first round pick is a receiver here. So I think they try to replace Stefon Diggs, and then they go from there and see who's available later in the first round. As much as I'm sure the New England Patriots would have loved at the 23rd pick to have a quarterback, Jordan Love, to kind of be their future, it's just not going to happen. And there are no other quarterbacks worth taking. Jacob Eason isn't, like I had originally predicted, like early on. It's just not going to be there. So I have them taking someone that they think Brian Hoyer is going to have a safety blanket for, and that's tight end Cole Kmet. His 2019 stats aren't screaming off the page. 515 yards, 6 touchdowns, 12 yards per reception. But, anyone who scouted him knows that he is the definitive best tight end in this draft. Another guy like later is Trotman, but I don't think he's going to definitely separated himself from the pack, and something that I think they're going to want to give whoever their quarterback is going to be, because like we saw last year, say what you will about Tom Brady being old, they lacked offensive weapons like crazy, and there really aren't any receivers at this point that I think the Patriots are willing to take, because they're very smart when it comes to who they're drafting. So I think that overall it's a pretty smart draft pick, and something that they won't regret. And he'll have a productive first season. I could see him having 700 yards, especially for someone like Brian Hoyer is going to want to throw to him all the time. Okay, moving on to the 24th pick. We have the New Orleans Saints. Definitely someone who I think has risen, and someone who I think is pretty raw overall is outside linebacker Kavon Chaisson. 2019 stats, he had a forced fumble, 6.5 stats, 13.5 tackles for a loss. If I can just pull them up in just 1 second here. He's extremely fast. He's just a little underweight. He actually struggles with runs straight at him. He's definitely not someone that you're going to want to put it at the base of your 4.3. Durability concerns, lacks experience. There's a lot of things, but in terms of just the raw talent, the speed out of the linebacker position, he could really turn into something big. I mean, his career is really teetering on being very good or someone who just never develops, and that's something that whoever's going to draft him is going to have to take on the risk. But I definitely think he's deserving of a first round pick if whoever that defensive coordinator is who takes him on. And I think Sean Payton definitely could fill that role as someone who could lead him in the right direction. He could be the best linebacker in this draft outside of Isaiah Simmons. I think he could be better than Kenneth Murray. It's hard to teach speed. You can teach technique and everything else, but when it comes to him, it is hard to beat. So yeah, Minnesota Vikings obviously have their second first round pick. They're going to want to look to improve their defensive end now, and they're going to be taking defensive end Yetur Gross-Matos. 2019 stats includes 9 sacks, 14.5 tackles for a loss. Out of Penn State, he's a natural edge rusher, great instincts, length, burst, active hand, steady motor. He just he definitely is one of the slower. He is the slowest at the defensive ends, the elite defensive ends from this first round. He can get pushed back. His strength is a little bit of a question, and he also tends to stand up too high as well. That seems to be kind of a college thing, in my opinion. Um, he's also a great run defender and something that I think will attract Minnesota the most. Um, he basically is going exactly where I think he should be going in the draft, and I think Minnesota will be pretty happy to see him get to them at this point. Not too high, not too low, just kind of that sweet spot. Miami Dolphins with their last first round pick here. I think they go offensive line again. Like I said, they barely have anyone deserving to be a starter on their offensive line as it's constructed now, and they're going to have to invest in a quarterback, or they're just going to waste another career of a guy. And they're picking the best interior offensive lineman in the draft because the gap after this is pretty intense. So I think that's definitely something that's going to be on their mind. His Cesar Ruiz. I'm sorry if I didn't mention that. Miami Dolphins select centers Cesar Ruiz here. He's definitely the only one being considered this high. He's slow to speed rushers. Average awareness. Again, those are things that I'm not necessarily too worried about, considering that the speed rushers are usually coming off the edge, not right down the center in the middle. So I think he'll be fine. And I think Miami will be pretty satisfied, getting their franchise quarterback and getting two guys who they feel can protect him on a consistent basis. And someone that can, and these guys can basically grow up with their quarterback as well. I could definitely see them being for 5 years plus. They're hoping that these are going to be the staple of his offensive line for his career for Tua. Seattle, like at the end of the day, they have to invest in offensive line. I think that's been pretty well documented. Something that you see Russell Wilson just running for his life on a very consistent basis, and the best offensive lineman at this point, in my opinion, is Austin Jackson. Out of USC, obviously. Great athlete, quick feet. He's able to pull, can hit blocks in space. He can set up too far inside and outside. His hand placement needs to be better. He does tend to have a problem holding on to blocks for long periods of time. He's more of like a quick movability type of offensive lineman, and I think that fits pretty well when it comes to Seattle. It's something I think they'll be pretty happy and fit into their system, which is pretty quick paced and very motion based, especially with Russell Wilson. So I think it ends up being kind of a perfect fit for them. And I really don't see them taking anyone else. They have to at some point invest in their offensive line, or else they won't have a chance again. At 28th, as much as Baltimore would love to take a receiver, I think they're also smart when it comes to drafting. I think they're going to end up taking outside linebacker Patrick Queen from LSU. Another guy similar to Chassian, in my opinion. 2019 stats included 1 interception, 3 sacks, and 12 tackles for a loss. Here we go. Another guy with elite speed, similar to Chassian. And then another reason why LSU's defense was just so good last year. He has, again, that means he's good at zone coverage, but also means he has potential for man coverage depending on the defensive scheme. Not stiff, good in space. He's a guy just like Chassian. Like I said, he's raw. He lacks experience. He needs a development. He needs to be stronger when it comes to defending, to shedding blocks. Basically a mirror edge to Chassian. I really don't know how else to say it. Another guy with just massive potential to be exactly what you need him to be when it comes to coverage from your linebacker, outside linebacker / middle linebacker position. Tennessee is going to do whatever they can to roll it back. I think that goes without say. They want to just take what they did and just bloop right next season, go back to the playoffs, do their thing. They're going to take the best offensive tackle available, which is Ezra Cleveland. It's unfortunate for Tennessee specifically that so many teams need offensive tackles this year. But I mean, that's the hand that was dealt to them. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. They're just going to try to take the best offensive tackle available and hope it works. I don't think he necessarily should be a first round pick, but in terms of desperate ability and where they're at right now, I don't think they're going to try to find a developmental defensive piece at this point. They're going to try to find the guy who can protect Tannehill, who they just paid a bunch of money to at this spot. This is where I think the bait comes in. This is the first piece of bait that I see. I see 30th overall, the Green Bay Packers selecting Denzel Mims. 2019 stats, 1,020 yards, 12 touchdowns, 15.5 yards per reception. Definitely not bad. Do I think he should go in the first round? No, I don't. Do I think that the Green Bay Packers are going to have narrow vision and do whatever they can to try to appease Aaron Rodgers? I do, absolutely. He's got a good size. He's got a nose for the end zone. Doesn't have a great speed. He's not great on 50-50 passes. Has drop problems. He's going to struggle to separate himself. Again, I don't think he should go in the first round, but I think the Packers are just going to go for the next best available and be sad, basically, that the receivers they took there and not have a backup plan when Justin Jefferson is not there, which is, I'm sure, who they want. Now we're getting to the end. Cisco, and I think they'll be pretty happy that Christian Fulton fell here. The obvious thing is that they needed a corner in the Super Bowl. Is kind of one of the big reasons why they lost. And Christian Fulton is a great cover cornerback. Now, I also think that they're hoping that if they make the Super Bowl again, they're not playing the Chiefs, because his speed is definitely something that has to be worked on. And I don't know how you can work on speed. And that's a big problem when it comes to corners. I've never seen a cornerback improve his speed so dramatically. But I'm sure they're hoping that he can be a guy who can cover maybe a tight end or a less fast corner or a receiver, excuse me. He also has troubles with being too physical down the field, and his discipline is very sketchy, which is a big reason why he's falling to 31st, along with his speed. So it's just kind of one of those things where he could end up being one of the best cover corners of this draft, if not the best cover corner outside of Jeffrey Okudah. But, there's definitely some questions there. He got suspended for the 2017 season, not things you like to see. And it's just one of those guys every year where he's like, oh, they dropped because of this reason. They could have been a top 15. I mean, he's like the poster boy for that. Similarly, I think the Kansas City Chiefs, they need a cornerback as well. So at the last pick of the first round, you got 2019 stats of 2 interceptions, 3 passes defended, nothing great, obviously. They're going to be taking AJ Terrell out of Clemson. Good height, good length, fast, willing to help on the run defense, which is very important. At the end of the day, he's a better athlete than he is a football player. Someone that probably played running back and wide receiver at high school and got converted because he wasn't good enough to do it in college. Again, this is where we're getting to the end of the first round, obviously, and going into the second round. These are kind of these really massive gray areas that are hard to predict. I'm just going off of, in my opinion, talent and position need. I think it kind of fills in correctly here. Lots of the big trend in defensive now are defensive linemen and corners and linebackers. I mean, you see it. It's going all the way down. Running backs, nope. I didn't have any running backs being taken in the first round. Barely any tight ends, but I mean, that's pretty regular. Again, skill positions, I think people are realizing, is a pretty frugal thing at the end of the day. People are more interested in defense at this point and less interested in running backs, just because you saw it in the Super Bowl. No name running backs on both sides. They just don't matter anymore, which is sad, but it's the truth. Anyways, that was my first round there, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you guys enjoyed the NFL draft, and maybe if you see us before the draft, and we'll see how close I got to it. I'm sure there's tons of mistakes, but that's just how I could see it going down, and I'll be curious and excited to see. I'll try to do a live stream, but I'm going to be moving out and about tomorrow, so we'll see if it ends up working out where I'm able to live stream. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.